Dobar dan svima, dobrodošli u prvu epizodu prve sezone FENIKS podkasta. Ja sam Stevan Filipović i bit ću vaš voditelj, inače sam reditelj i profesor na Fakultetu dramskih umetnosti, bar za sada, situacija je nestabilna, pratimo iz minuta u minut. U ovom podcastu ćemo pokušati da se bavimo, u stvari da tražimo taj odgovor na pitanje da li umetnost i kultura zapravo mogu da menjaju svet. Ja mislim da mogu tako što menjaju ljude koji kroz gledanje filmova, čitanje knjiga, slušanje muzike, gledanje televizijskih serija i tako dalje, menjaju svoju predstavu o sebi, menjaju svoju percepciju stvarnosti oko sebe, odnos prema drugim ljudima, uče o društvu, uče o politici i nekako je to onda ta promena koju zapravo želimo da vidimo. Sad, kako je to uvezano sa popularnom kulturom, kako se to reflektuje na naše svakodnevne živote, kakve to veze ima sa globalnom ili lokalnom politikom, to su sve teme kojima ćemo se baviti na različite načine i nadam se sa vrlo zanimljivim sagovornicima i sagovornicama u ovom podcastu. U prvoj epizodi ćemo da se bavimo fenomenom koji je počeo još 1977. koji je na mene lično možda najviše uticao, to je serijal Ratova i zvezda koji je počeo Džordž Lukas, a sada nastavljaju različiti umetnici manje ili više uspešno. Mislim da je Lukas postavio temelje na ajde kažem, principima onoga što je Tolkien radio sa Gospodarom prstenova, postavio temelje jednog sveta paralelnog, imaginarnog, u kome se zaista mogu ispričati različite priče. Sada ću pređem na engleski, and welcome Spaceman or Šonom Rodžersom. I was just explaining in Serbian how much Star Wars meant to me when I was a kid. I'm 80s kid. I was born in 81. I was watching the country disintegrate and the society disintegrate. And this was, you know, in Narnia, how they have this door that takes them to another dimension. So mentally, Star Wars was the thing that kept me sane. And I suppose I wanted to talk to you about my maybe favorite piece of art that came from Džordž Lukas's vision, and that's Andor, the TV series. And why I wanted to talk to you in particular was a lot of people talked about how technically perfect it is, how well executed Andor is, but you sort of nailed it in that essay. I'll provide the link below. I really recommend everybody to watch it if they haven't already. You nailed the emotion of it, just the tone of it, and why did it resonate? You sort of gave the perfect answers, at least for me. I'd like to start with a talk about fandom, or whatever we want to call it, like love for Star Wars. What was your entry point into this world, and when?
My dad's a big film guy, so he was like, you're going to watch it the way it was designed, and so we watched it the way it came out. And I still have like images of episode 4 burned into my brain from when I was a kid. Just that was my entry point, was the first original trilogy, and then I remember being kind of there when the prequel trilogy was coming out. As a kid, I was like, this is great. I didn't, I understood my parents didn't like them as much as I liked them. But as a child, I was like, it's Džordž Lukas Star Wars. It's amazing. It's everything I want. So I have an affinity for the prequels that I know a lot of people still don't quite have, but I grew up with the original trilogy, and that was my entry into everything. I mean, every kid on my block wanted a lightsaber when we were 5. It was just, it was religion for kids. So it's still kind of that way as an adult.
For me, it's a different story, a little bit different. I remember like I was 6 maybe, and my best friend's uncle, we wanted to watch a horror film on VHS. And he said, I have this amazing horror film with a giant slug. And then he put on Return of the Jedi. So that was my entry point. And I remember crying when Darth Vader was dying. And I thought this is like the best film ever. And then I sort of realized that there is something called The Empire Strikes Back. And I thought like this is the best title ever. And then I saw The Empire also via VHS, and later I saw the New Hope. So it was kind of, I went backwards completely. New Hope was sort of okay, but I don't know if I would love Star Wars so much, if it would mean to me so much if it started with a New Hope, because like the world building in the later ones is so amazing, and it goes so far that I think for each one of us, depending on the generation and circumstances, it's really different. And for the prequels, it was actually the way it's the beginning of internet, the dawn of like streaming and so on. I remember like trying to download the trailer for Phantom Menace, and that was mind blowing. Like seeing Darth Maul and like getting the feeling that this is actually going to continue.
Just seeing it on the big screen and seeing what Lucas was going for, it is really hard to put into words for newer fans how big that jump was to the prequels and how much that completely changed everything, recontextualized Star Wars for a lot of people. The prequels did a lot in terms of world building that most shows, TV, movies, etc., would kill to have that much detail put into everything he did. So it's been nice to revisit those movies and just look at it from like creatively, from like a creator's perspective. What was he doing? What was he trying to do? What was he telling visually? And it's unreal what he did.
And then with Revenge of the Sith, I feel that he actually had every tool at his disposal to tell the story he wanted. And the strange thing is, Revenge of the Sith had the premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. They understood the politics of it. Politically, this film is really a manifesto.
You cannot let 1,000 years of democracy disappear without a fight.
I mean, it's in the subtext, a lot of it. It's in all the additional stuff, the comics, the games. You have to invest to see the full picture. But it is there, and it is pretty amazing. It's like watching Guernica in a museum for the first time. You know, you see all these little pictures, but when you walk in this museum in Madrid and you see this masterpiece, and you're completely blown away. So that's at least what I felt with The Revenge of the Sith.
The politics always stayed up there, but this time it didn't feel like it was as overtly over the head, I think, as Lucas was trying to go for in the first two movies. And he really just focused on kind of letting the world tell the story this time. And when it did, I mean, again, with a movie that still has problems, I would be shocked if there was anybody at that festival who didn't just revert back to being a kid for a second and look at the totality of the film, especially with the ending, and just say, like, how can you not be moved by something, regardless of how technical or highbrow you think it is? How could you not see this film and be like, wow, the dude did it? Like, he pulled off a ridiculously jam-packed, incredibly thematic landing point for a saga and a trilogy. And did it in a way where we all knew the outcome, we all knew the answer, but he still made it really, really impactful, really interesting, and it didn't tarnish what came before. If anything, it really helped prove that Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones still have merit. So it was an incredible feat for Lucas, I think, of all his accomplishments in the prequels. I think the totality of Revenge of the Sith and getting it to stick the landing the way it did that's part of his legacy and his resume, that no matter the criticisms, nobody can take that away from him.
So what did you feel after that? Like, was there a real future or any space for like Star Wars after Lucas, or did you feel like, okay, this is it, the saga is complete?
Same thing with like Lord of the Rings. I think, you know, the books, the original run that's Lord of the Rings. Everything else is just kind of additional content. Same with Dune. It's like the first two books, like Dune and then Messiah. It's like that's the story, but everything else is just additional. So for me, Star Wars has always been, at the end of the day, it's the 6 movies, it's that one tale, and everything additional, whether it's comics, books, television, games, podcasts, anything. It's all additional content for me.
So how did you feel about the Clone Wars animated series?
It is an investment that pays off in season 7, and it is easily one of the better creations I think Star Wars has made. It suffers from filler and a little bit of bloatedness at times, but when I finished watching it, it was one of the first videos I made. It was like, I want to talk about this whole show in season 7 because building Ahsoka from somebody that everybody hated. Everybody was like, we don't like her. She's annoying. We don't like what she brings to the table. Building her into a very capable, intelligent, and very layered character. I think that was maybe the biggest testament to Filoni's career so far.
The sum of it is really amazing. And then after that, or in the middle of that, I think before season 7, we actually got this unexpected gift of Rogue One.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. Wow.
So this is our way to actually move closer to talk about Andor. But how did you feel about that? It was a surprise for me. I didn't expect. It seemed like, okay, why would I actually watch a film about how the Death Star maps were found? But it was actually something else. It sort of, for me at least, it brought back the idea, the gravity of what rebellion actually is, the price of it. People die. And in Rogue One, we're going into spoiler territory now. In Rogue One, everybody dies, and that was like, finally, Rogue One for me brought back the stakes. Okay, this is a revolution, and there is a price to it. And as I lived through one, I know that there is a huge price, and also there is a lot of one of the prices, and one of the biggest prices is compromise. But we'll talk about that when we talk about Andor. But it's not. It's just briefly touched upon in Rogue One. But what did you think about it?
I've grown up as an American, and I am, much like my current generation, I am not too thrilled with what our foreign policy, what our government's foreign policy has been. I mean, I grew up during the time of 9/11. I grew up during the time of the Iraq War. I was witnessing what the government was doing across the world, and how they have also collectively treated their citizens here. And it's a lot of the media now, especially like Rogue One and Andor, it reflects the indiscriminate nature of war, and also the actions that go into leading up to revolution or rebellion or anything like that. It has a very specific tone to it that it catches you by surprise, and everybody can relate to it. Every single person can watch this and be like, I see something either about myself, or I see something about the world I'm living in that I know is directly being represented on screen. So when Rogue One just kind of came in and said, hey, the fantasy is great of Star Wars, but this is not a fantasy story about fantasy characters. This is a real life story about real people set in this world. It caught me by surprise when I was like, I think I was like 18 at the time. And, again, the payoff with Vader is great, but I think the impact that Rogue One had with me was, there's something more here that's very real. And once you see that, once you realize that something's a little bit more real, it sits with you way differently than any other Star Wars movie had at that point. And I found it really interesting. And there was a quote by Tarantino I was watching the other day, an interview on him, and he said, when he's writing his movies, all he does is tell the truth with his characters. He's like, I'm just telling the truth. And that sat with me for the last couple of days. And it's also something that I look at with Andor and Rogue One, is like, Gareth Edwards and Tonija Gilroya came in and they told the truth. They just about the politics, the setting, the consequences, the cost, what's happening. There is no, we're propping up characters to be the good guy, we're propping up characters to be the bad guy. It's just, there are characters and there's a cost and there's an objective, and this is what's going to happen and how it needs to happen. And I think telling the truth, especially around political dramas, especially around material that is sensitive because it understands the world it's in and currently what's going on in the world that we both live in, telling the truth through your characters, both through their world and for how this would play out if it was playing out, was the first time I felt like Star Wars kind of reached that next level cinematically. I mean, not only is it shot by Greg Fraser, who's maybe the best cinematographer, I believe, working today, just a master of the camera, but it had a specific tone to it that no other Star Wars movie at that point had. And I think it was really, really, it was quite defining for a lot of Star Wars fans, myself included. It was a very different experience of us being like, oh, Star Wars can be so much more. It can be this very gritty, very realistic, hypersensitive political piece that does not shy away from the conversation.
You can stand to see the Imperial flag reign across the galaxy.
It's not a problem if you don't look up.
It doesn't just say, oh, there's authoritarian regimes. That's terrible. We have to blow up the Death Star. It's like, let's talk about actually how we get to that point and every domino that makes that possible. And so again, how that feeds into Andor, we'll talk about, but it's Rogue One is maybe like the hidden gem of Star Wars. And in a lot of ways, I think it might be the best movie. It has its problems for sure, but the last act of Rogue One, it might be the best Star Wars movie. It just has a feel, it has a weight to it that it was unexpected when it came out, and it's still mind-blowing that they took that swing and that it worked so well.
It's like an art house film. Like the level of freedom you feel they had doing this is just amazing. I mean, and on that note, do you feel the sequels were like doomed from the start, like they were stillborn because they were like kind of living in Serbia now? And having this experience, actually it's not a uniquely Serbian experience, it's happening everywhere, even in the States, but the rise of authoritarian regimes, I felt before I saw the films that actually that had potential. You know, it could be a powerful, impactful story because empires do come back. Maybe sometimes in more vicious forms. And this is literally what is happening in my country now. And that's the potential I saw in hypothetical sequels that are not these sequels. You know, okay, these things do return. You know, but we don't have to waste much time. Just any thoughts if you have on those.
That is a story that could work in Star Wars for sure. You can make Kylo Ren this nomad who maybe jumps between the light and the dark in a way that he thinks he's on this like ethical journey of trying to cleanse the bad world or something. You can make him a very morally difficult but complex character. They didn't do that. And you can make Rey somebody who thinks she's really important, turns out to be a nobody, and make that really interesting. You can make Luke a complete 180 from what he was, but you have to do it correctly. And I think that's just the thing. It's like they went for big swings, and if they had set it up properly, it would have been one of the most experimental trilogies I think Star Wars could do, but they didn't do the groundwork to earn those moments or to make them interesting enough to be like, okay, I'm on board with you at this point. So for me, I was just like, I was like, oh God, what are we doing? This is not good.
I was fortunate enough to meet Mark Hamill and to talk to him for hours about that. And I honestly did congratulate him about his work. And I'm sure the actors, almost everybody gave their best. So it's not their fault. Absolutely. You know. So after those things, and then you think, okay, maybe this is not for me anymore. Maybe I grew up, and then maybe it's time to move on to alternative European filmmaking. and then Andor happens.
Yeah.
The most unexpected thing, you know, the prequel of a prequel. So it's a story about the character from Rogue One and how he became politicized and how he became revolutionary. And I think this is the one of the most brilliant pieces of art, however you want to call it, that I ever watched, regardless of it being Star Wars or not. I mean, I just reviewed almost the entire season before our conversation, and I cried at some moments. It's absolutely amazing, and just the political aspect of it, they nailed it so perfectly. That slippery slope where you still have the facade of institutions that are working, but actually fascism is like days away. You know, from stormtroopers marching in the streets, Rick's Road or however it's called, you know. And when I heard like they had screenwriters from House of Cards and they had Nicholas Brittle who did the soundtrack for Succession, I was like, what? You know,
they didn't hold back, but anyway,
you know what's happening? This should be interesting, and it is slow burning. But when did it hit you?
It hit me in the first episode. It was a little bit when when Cassian, the first shot of the entire series, again, for the Blade Runner fans, it was like, oh, okay, there's a little bit of Blade Runner. Okay, what do we got here? And after Cassian, he goes essentially into a brothel and tries to find his sister. And I'm like, okay, like setting wise, we're taking a swing here. Let's see where it goes. It was him killing the two guards, the two corporate officers, I should say, that the killing of it wasn't necessarily the catalyst for me. It was, as soon as that was done, the next scene is Cyril sitting in Morlana 1 talking with his superior about the killing. And the separation between a corporate officer who clearly is just trying to get through the day, and Cyril, the fresh-faced guy on the market who has something to prove, and he thinks that he needs to prove to be a incredibly competent imperial officer. The separation, that conversation right there, was the moment we started hearing the corporate officer talk about, they were harassing somebody they shouldn't be harassing. They shouldn't have been able to afford being in that brothel in the first place. Let's set up a funeral, but don't make it too fancy. We don't want a parade. Let's kind of keep it under the attention to detail with the motive of conversation, the vocabulary that they were using to separate characters from each other. I'm very big on being able to hear where a director's going when they're using their characters to kind of lay out the world, and hearing the corporate officer and Cyril discuss how they were approaching from two different perspectives this one incident was immediately, that was that conversation where I knew, I was like, okay, wait a minute, like we're about to get something very different for Star Wars. Like, it was the attention to detail on very, very simple things that shouldn't matter. That is when I knew. I was like, wait a minute. Now, I had no idea what we were going to get, obviously, but I knew that clearly if we're putting this much attention to detail into a conversation within the first 10 minutes, that clearly will probably not come back around in any meaningful way outside of this room. What does that mean for the rest of the show?
If Rogue One was about revolution, but it was still big canvas.
Yes.
It grounded us a bit, but Andor really puts us on the ground level, and this perspective of like ordinary citizen of this totalitarian regime that's changing from all the sides. And I think they've been honest to all the characters, and they have similar journeys. You mentioned Cyril Karn, who is like this low-level corporate officer, basically like a police guy. He's fighting with dysfunctional, disinterested corporate authority, and he's right. So it gives you that little something to root for him, and there is this shadow of this wide picture of this war, and it gets more intense, of course, as we progress, but they never lose sight of these details with the characters. I almost felt like there were no side characters. What really turned me like into a fanatic of this series is Mon Mothma. I know like this woman. it's like it's a side character, and it's like great that you have this strong female leader of the rebellion, very poised, very gracious, very calm. Even many buttons died in Return of the Jedi, and I that stayed with me. And we saw a bit more of her in Rogue One, but in Andor you have this underlying theme of compromise that I think touches every character, and that's actually what's the cost of the revolution. What's the personal cost? What do we pay? And there are even like some speeches about that one by Stellan Skarsgård that's absolutely amazing. But her subtlety is something I have never seen in Star Wars. Like the subtlety of the dialogue, the nuances, like the blink of an eye that tells 1,000 tales of what this woman is going through.
As long as everyone thinks I'm an irritation, there's a good chance they'll miss what I'm really doing.
What are you really doing?
But you could judge her, like superficially. If you're not one of those 3 people in the galaxy she mentions that know who she really is, you can say, okay, this is a woman who is actually giving legitimacy to this fascist regime. She's serving in the Senate. She's married to this obnoxious rich guy, and she's living this high life in Coruscant, completely cut and severed from like lives of the people like Marva or Andor. But then you actually, as the show progresses, you see that her sacrifice can actually be compared. It's a different level, but it's the ultimate sacrifice in some way, like for her as for the other characters. So it humanizes her in a way that's artistically impeccable.
For people, I guess, who maybe haven't seen it yet or think we're hyperbolizing, we're really not. Like, the show puts the soul and the human in the people that it's following. And again, it does a very specifically poignant job of separating the oppressors from the people being oppressed. And what it does is it follows what are the motives and the goals and what are the actions and the philosophies of the oppressors, and how do they try to achieve their goals, and what are the things standing in their way, and then what are the goals and philosophies and challenges of people being oppressed, and what are the things that stand in their way of achieving their goals, and like what is the compromise of the oppressors and how do they try to keep the system moving, and what are the compromises and the sacrifices of the people being oppressed, and how do they try to fight the system. And it shows both those things at the same time, because you can't show one without the other. I think that's something that Star Wars definitely suffers with, but a lot of media suffers with, is it wants to say this is a story about oppression, but it doesn't show both sides. And it's not that you're showing the good sides of an authoritative regime, you're showing the truth of an authoritative regime and how that works. And I think that a lot of media at times struggles to understand that it's okay to be objective if you're telling the truth, and if you're showing the authoritative regime, they have goals, they have wins, they have losses. This is how they think. The people being oppressed, this is how they get oppressed. This is what they're working now through. This is the sacrifices they have to make to break that cycle. And this is the cost of everything. And it's showing the cost and action and reaction of both sides constantly against one another in this show that works so well. But it's also, I mean, the same thing with Rogue One. Andor in two ways. Number one, it's its own trilogy because it has 3 distinct arcs that it goes through, and it has like its own trilogy of conception for Cassian as a character. And then number two, it's a show that exists in the fringe of everything else, not just in time in the period in which it's being set, but it is right before the revolution starts. It is right after the authoritative regime is won. That is an aspect that in my initial review, I talked about what Andor does that no other Star Wars thing does, is it shows the world on the fringe. Like, it understands what the focal point of the characters are, what the scene is. It knows, you know, we're having a conversation with Luthen and Mon Mothma in an antique shop, and they're talking about, you know, how they're going to transfer funds and bring somebody onto the team. And any other Star Wars show, that would just be, I have this idea for a person I want to bring on. Can we trust them? I don't know. Well, I trust you, so I trust them. And that would be the end of it. In this show, instead of just showing us what's dead center on the screen, instead, let's swing over to a back room. So let's bring the location, let's bring the focal point of the scene, let's bring the thematics of the scene off kilter just a little bit. Let's go to the back room. And then what does that allow for the way you write the scene? It's no longer just 2 main characters having a discussion. It's now you're in like this side pocket. You're thinking about the time period. You're thinking about the situation these characters are in. You're thinking about the setting. You're thinking about the philosophy at this point of where Luthen's at, where Mon Mothma's at, the challenges they're both facing, and how does that affect the conversation they would then have in real time? How are they going to tell the truth about their situation to one another?
Don't lecture me on vulnerability. No one's more at risk than I am. You think I haven't thought this through? I'd be the first one to fall.
But it's the way that Andor shows the world physically, tactically, philosophically, emotionally. It shows the world of Star Wars on the fringe at a time period where the worst thing that's ever happened has just happened, and the best thing that will ever happen to people in that system is about to happen. What does that look like? And what does that mean? It can't just be, I'm sad because it's another day under the Empire. It has to be, I have to worry about being arrested for a crime I didn't even do when I'm just trying to get out with my life. I have to worry about the bureaucracy of fighting through a for-profit prison system that is artificially raising our sentencing times. And, you know, it's churning people in and out. Like, it's the attention to detail of people who understand what oppression looks like versus a lot of media where people are good at showing oppression, but not good at telling us and bringing that all to a head, how it works through the characters. You can show me that cops are going to beat up somebody that they have no business beating up, and they're going to throw them in prison. You can show me that one dictator says, I want power forever. Oh my God, that's so scary. But if you don't show me how the system's in place, the prison system, the court, the judicial system, the politics of the world, even the casual conversations of people at Mon Mothma's party where, you know, these are high-ranking, I assume, rebel or I guess in that world, just Senate officials who are saying, you know, I don't like what Palpatine's doing, but as long as the Senate keeps moving, I guess everything's okay.
Literally the sentences I hear people saying
Yes,
in Serbia now. Like it's okay. We don't. His style is like maybe too much, but it's still like the economy is not so bad. And I was like, this guy is like a lunatic and a war criminal.
Yeah, it's that thing
just
there.
Look at him. You know, it's so absolutely fantastic. But what you just said is like actually, if somebody asked me what good directing is, it's those two components. One is to have lived experience and to actually understand and try to understand the perspectives of people you're talking about and like the historical references for which there are many. And on the other hand, like that's it. Like take this scene. On paper, you have conversation between two characters, but in the hands of a capable director, you move them away, and so they're in the shadows, so they have to lower their voices to whisper, but they're full of emotion. So this is a conflict already, you know. They have to use the whispering, but also they're very emotional about these things, and they're on the opposing sides. And there in the background, you have a guy who is an ISB mole who is watching them constantly. So you have this extra tension of that.
I had a line in my review where I was like, trying to review this is a bit daunting because I don't quite know that level of detail is. I think that's what made most of us, you, me, like it made us question, like, are we really seeing this? Is Star Wars really going here? Because it is a level of detail and a level of attention to script writing that is, again, especially for Western audiences, I think a lot of people who are like, Star Wars, Andor is so slow, it's so boring. I grew up on much slower media. I grew up on, again, like a lot of British media and Eastern influence, and so like I'm used to like long dialogue. I'm used to like this sort of Shakespearean flow of let's have a scene where people are just talking for like 20 minutes. That's what I grew up with. And so Western audiences are like, there's no action. There's not, like, the action is the fact that, you know, that Luthen's in a cave right now negotiating for the lives of 2 or 3 people and trying to get Saw Gerrera to not be as radical as he is at the moment, but understanding that Saw's like, that's the action for me. It's like the action is the fact, the amount of detail that's currently between these two characters. How do you bring out subtext? How do you bring out the themes of what's happening? It's not just that the actors feel like they lived in the characters. It's not just that like it felt like adults were in the room at all times. Like, we are here to have a serious conversation. I mean, I'm sure for you as well, like you walk away and you're like, that did not feel like it happened. Like it felt like it was real world. I'm watching somebody go through something that's being documented. It felt like a documentary a lot of the times. It's unreal how they accomplish that.
Also, it like profoundly changed the way how I perceive stuff around me. Like, are we actually sleeping, you know, in this country? When is that magical moment where we should awake and realize how deep we are in our problems? You know, so that's what I expect of like the best of art. And I got this with Succession, and then I got this with Andor, and with added bonus that it's set in Star Wars universe, and I can appreciate all the references. But they're not. This is not fan service. I mean, these references are just like the deep knowledge of the world that they're talking about. And I think anybody. Do you think people who didn't watch Star Wars can watch Andor?
Now, granted, you'll pick up on things. Like, I think Andor does a really good job of dropping you in the middle of the situation and just saying like, there are factors in play. These are the characters. These are the people that exist. But the thing that Andor does that it doesn't make it impossible for anybody who's never seen Star Wars to watch is it doesn't treat either legacy moments like they're legacy moments. It doesn't look at itself in the mirror and be like, hey, guess what? It's me. It doesn't do that. It's like when Palpatine's name gets dropped, it's in the middle of like, it's in the middle of an ISB hearing where we're talking about raising prison sentences. And it's not because Palpatine's here, we must do this. It's, hey guys, we need to stop letting criminals run on the loose because Palpatine's pissed off, and that means we're going to start moving towards raising prison sentences, and any minor offense is now a felony. Like, it's important information about the lore of Star Wars is said in passing, but if you're listening, you'll understand the context of the situation, why that person's being brought up, and then how their dynamic plays into the larger structure of Star Wars. And I like that that's the way it was. I like that we didn't see a lot of legacy ideas or themes or characters, because again, it's the idea of Star Wars in the original 6 movies, to me, is this soulful, spiritual, very Space Wizards fantasy idea that exists kind of up here. And Andor and Rogue One being down here just a little bit shows me that the separation between the two, Vader and Palpatine have absolutely no care in the world about what's happening to Narkina 5. They could care less. Their problems are world-ending, force-dealing problems that should have no bearing on anything else. But below them is an entire system of reality that they have absolutely no, not that they don't have control over, but they have no reason to interact with. And I like that there was a separation of, you want the highbrow fantasy spiritual side, you want these characters being separated because of power and because of just essence. You can go look at the 6 movies and look at the Jedi Knights and the Empire, but there's a world that exists below them that is deeper than that. I think a lot of media at times wants to swing wider when they just need to swing deeper. It's like, instead of just going wider and saying there's force users everywhere and there's this and that, let's talk about what's underneath everything. It's Cassian, who seemingly is always waking up in prison. He's waking up for the day and then being drowned out by desensitization of visuals and sound, and just his spirit in Narkina 5 is just being crushed. Like, they have rituals, they have drills where, hot man on the floor, team that loses, you're going to be electrocuted for 5 minutes. We're going to break your spirit in Narkina. That's the whole point. It's that there are layers to it for sure. And it knows how to show you everything you need to see to understand how to look at yourself. Like you just said, like, you want to be cognizant of, am I sleeping right now? Is the world really what I see it as it is? You walk away from this not only thinking about Star Wars is cool, but you think, I can apply this to the life I'm seeing now. I can apply the increased prison sentences that make no sense to the American for-profit prison system. I can see the government that's complacent with corruption, what that leads to. And it's impossible to not walk away from this season and not think about the life that you're living and be like, oh my God, like, it's so scary because it's so real. It is so truthful. With everything it talks about, you're like, I know that I'm living in this. I know that I'm aware of what my government's doing. So you don't need to know Star Wars to see this. Knowing Star Wars gives you a little bit of like, oh, I recognize that. I know what that means. But it's a Star Wars story, but it's so much more than just Star Wars. And it's about human people. It's about, like I said, it's about the cost of being alive and what that means. And oppression impacts everybody. I mean, there's a saying in America, it's like, government, you don't fuck with government until government fucks with you. It's that thing of like, you can put your head down and be on Ferrix and keep the shipping lanes open, but the moment they start fucking with you, and they will, that's when you need to wake up. And it's like, it's trying to get Cassian to realize that sooner rather than later, and why Luthen's so stressed all the time. So yeah, I think it is a human story that I would be prescribing it to. If I was teaching, I'd be like, you have to, of all the books you have to read, this is a show you have to watch. 1984 and then Fahrenheit 451. Like, along with those books, you need to watch Andor, because you need to understand the time period you're living in, for the world history we're both living in, but also just, this is an important lesson that we shouldn't be forgetting. Like, Andor was made in a specific time in the world. You look at what's going on with like Israel and Palestine right now. It's impossible to not look at Andor and be like, wow, they were very cognizant of what's happening in the world right now, and why this is important to talk about, which is, again, a miracle that Disney let it through. I don't know how. It never ever felt like a company was trying to make the message, even if it wanted to make that message, even if it's a great message that it's like, this is a very progressive idea. I don't trust corporations to have progressive ideas at this point. And even when they do, they don't always know how to say it. And then it comes off sounding really strange and kind of dystopian. This never felt like, even for a show as progressive as Andor, like, it is very radicalized in a lot of its ideas. I never ever felt like I'm being told this. It was, no, we're going to show you these things. And in turn, along with the characters, it's going to radicalize you. The situations themselves will do all the talking. Just let the environments do what they have to do, and you'll be a recipient of the radicalization. And I was like, okay, that works for me. I think that's what people want. They don't want to be, they want to be led to the realizations authentically and truthfully. They don't want to, have things to say, this is bad, therefore you should feel this. No, just show me how it's bad. Show me how it relates to the world I'm in, and how I can go outside and look at the news and see my government doing things and be like, oh my God, like what is happening? That's how you get to people. You don't tell them what they should feel. You show them the world they live in through the characters in something like Star Wars, and you let them come to that realization, and you just show them the truth.
The way Nemik meets his end, it's just so brutal, so unfortunate. It's symbolic, of course. It works on that level, but still, it's like a stupid accident. Yeah.
And that's a lot of death. It's just stupid. It's like, it's so stupid,
It's like the way Andor gets arrested. Mm-hmm. He thought he escaped this, and I think Marva tried to actually tell him that there is no escape. Yep. It's everywhere, but he fundamentally doesn't realize that. And paradoxically, he set in motion the chain of events that would lead to his arrest. Even when he thinks he escaped. So that's amazing. But speaking of paradoxes, should we be grateful to Disney then? Because we have this corporate entity that actually gave us Andor. So is it possible? It's like apparently there is space if you fight enough, and if the right people fight in the right way, maybe to create these amazing pieces of art within the framework of this soul-crushing corporate way of treating art as a product. So this is maybe a way to go, or maybe, I don't know. The fact that we will have season 2 is sort of telling that it succeeded.
So like, if they want to put out Mandalorian, that's great. I will watch it. Season 3 was not great, but like, I'll watch Mandalorian and be like, okay, you know what? I can turn my brain off. That's fine. But the fact that they allowed this to happen was not only a big step for them, I think, for Disney. I think there is a yearning in the world for media, as much great as it is to have breads and circuses and all that stuff. We want media that shows us who we are, what's happening now, and it makes us feel like we're actually being seen to an extent. Like it does feel like, I'm sure from where you're sitting and where I'm sitting, for both of our like countries and just how things are going, it has felt like the world's gotten weirder and crazier, and like the same people are saying, hey, this is weird and crazy, what's going on? And the ruling class is more of like, nah, it's okay, like nothing bad's happening. And we're like, are we on the same page? Is everything okay? We have been waiting, I think, in the world for something to kind of come along and be like, no, the world is as crazy as you say it is. And also, just the level of like, this is pure insanity, but nobody's talking about it. We were waiting for that feeling to kind of be magnified and to be shown at a larger scale. And I think that, again, it's a message that you're only willing to accept if you're open to receiving it. I think a lot of Star Wars fans just weren't open to receiving this. Whether or not they want to agree that that's the way the world's going is entirely up to them. But I think a lot of them were saying, oh, it's way too, again, it's the message of the show. It's way too political. It's way too like in your face about stuff. I'm like, yeah, because again, if you're alive, I would hope that if you're in tune with the world to some extent, you'd understand that this is like a documentary. This is a real story about real people that have fictional names, but this is happening.
Alone, unsure, dwarfed by the scale of the enemy. Remember this. Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere. And even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. Authority is brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear.
And it messes with all of us. Every single person on this earth is affected by oppression or institutions and systems that are deeply corrupted, even if you don't see it at first glance. Like, even if you don't see that the prison systems or the financial institutions or the governments or the conflicts around the world, the wars that are started, the way in which humanity treats each other, if you don't see that there are problems deep within every system, you're just not looking. And it's like this show just tried to say, hey, you don't have to know the answers. You don't have to jump into everything, but just start looking, start paying attention, just be willing to open your eyes just a little bit. And you know, it's one of those shows that like when you finished watching it, you're exhausted. You're like, oh my God, it's so much. It's a very heavy show, but I think it was so necessary because so many of us were waiting to feel like somebody else saw the world as depressing and as crazy as we see it. And not that that's a negative, but just we want to know that what we're seeing is true, that we're seeing oppression and we're seeing class warfare and we're seeing all kinds of things. We're seeing systems that are starting to break down and what that means. And when those systems break down, how do people in power react to that? What do they do? And how does the working class fight back against that? This show showed that. And again, the fact that it came from Disney is a miracle somehow. But
it's working. I mean, it's working.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we're having this conversation is a living proof, you know. And we had massive protests in Belgrade, 100,000 people. And I just put a clip of a translated version of FENIKS manifesto on Instagram, and I don't have many people on Instagram. I don't care about that too much. And it sort of exploded, and people were writing to me how they were crying, how every word is true, and that's like the living proof. You know, this is the truth that they're speaking. It's working. I mean, and it's not even shying away from trying to give you answers. As you said, it is a manifesto.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's a textbook, a manual for future revolutions. You know, so it's really radical for any company, you know, to be involved with this sort of potentially radioactive material in the light of what's happening. But if you want to make a revolution, okay, let's be adults, let's be serious, sit down and consider. You will have to give up on your family. You will have to do what Luton did, which he summed up perfectly in his speech.
What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
I mean, this is amazing, and everybody has to pay the price.
Yes.
You know, so that's the bottom line. You know, it's not going to move. We're not crazy. We're seeing the world as it is, and you know, we have to try harder, maybe, to filter information through several times to get what is actually the real truth or the fact of what happened, and then we have our own interpretations. But it's still, the truth is there. You know, no matter how clouded it is. And so in that regard, like, what expectations could we possibly have about season 2?
If season 1 was all there was, I think we'd both agree, like, I mean, okay, great. It's like perfect season of television. Like, I don't technically need anything else. But I think the thing that season 2 for me, that I want season 2 to do, that season 1 already kind of did, is season 1 worked on a spectrum of different things. It worked as well because it was a lot like Luthen's speech in episode 10, when he's talking with Lonnie and he gives his big speech. I was watching actually a interview with Gilroy or no interview with Skarsgård the other day, and he was talking about how like they did many takes for this, and Tony went up to him and said, you know, it feels too much like a speech. It sounds like you're speaking a speech. Like try to be a little bit more animalistic with it. And Skarsgård, like, he said that he was like, you know what, it sounds too much like a speech. I'm going to be tired. I'm going to be exhausted and give it. I'm going to give it as if I'm exhausted, and that's why it works so well. The smaller you go and the more intimate those conversations get, and the more friction you put between the characters, that's where it's like, okay, the sacrifices that then need to be made, they're going to hit that much harder. And also, you know, you're running out of runway here. It's like season 1 was half the runway, and now with every subsequent 3-episode arc, you're getting more tense, you're losing more runway to how you can land this thing in terms of where the characters are going. And the less and less runway you have, the more drastic the sacrifices have to be to stay ahead of the game. So it's like, I think you're right. I think we're going to get sacrifices maybe every 3 episodes of like, this has to happen now, and people are just going to start dropping. And it's, at that point, it's, you know, it's a moving train. It's good luck. But I think it's going to get very dire very quickly.
But also, like, not speaking in terms of fan service, but like in the way they treated every other characters. Would you love to, I was thinking about, like, Ian McDiarmid is a brilliant actor who plays Palpatine in I don't know how many films and TV series now. And it's a brilliantly written character. It's one of the most powerful Shakespearean antagonists in the history of this medium, and maybe, like, this guy deserves a chance to work on that level. I was thinking about that. I mean, I would love to see him work with, like, an actual director who can direct human dialogue, and also maybe we could get, like, a chance to demystify them. It's a knife's edge. I love what you said about. I personally felt like Palpatine was more in Andor season 1 just by mentioning the shadow of Palpatine is there. I mean, it's like the same in Lord of the Rings. You have the eye, but everybody's talking about Sauron, and you have the Saruman and Christopher Lee as proxies. So that works absolutely. But maybe there is this thin line that they could walk, and maybe Mon Mothma could actually, I'm thinking of the scenes, and it's you do fear them.
Yeah.
In the end, it's incredible that that they're pathetic. That their power is a bubble that can be bursted by, like, 3.5% of the population that rises against them. But still, seeing this evil in the eye, and this cruelty and this detachment from humanity, maybe could be interesting for the authors. And of course, calculating the fact that Ian McDiarmid is like 80 almost, and that he has a lot to offer, maybe more now than when he was younger. I mean, Christopher Lee had his peak when he was 80 and working with Lucas, Tim Burton, and Peter Jackson, and I had the opportunity to meet him. Yeah, I was in actually New Zealand, and I met the guys who did Lord of the Rings, and Sir Richard Taylor wrote to Christopher Lee in 2006 when I was visiting London that I wanted to meet him, and that never happened. And then in 2011, I think, I was getting some award in Slovenia, and he was getting some Lifetime Achievement Award. Wow. And we met, and he spoke to me in Serbian, because he was an MI6 agent in the Yugoslav war, so he knew a lot. And then he remembered that Richard Taylor wrote to him in 2006 that some guy wanted to meet him, whatever. But he's such an impressive actor, and I'm really, really satisfied that he got everything he deserved in the twilight of his life and his career. But he got Saruman, and he was a lifelong fan of Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. And I somehow feel that Ian McDiarmid, as an actor, sort of deserves this platform not to appear as a hologram in Obi-Wan, a poorly lit hologram. And then, then to have some of the best talents in the industry to treat him as a human being, and as a professional, as talented as he is. So that's my view. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's too personal.
I will say, like, you've kind of changed my mind on this, because as much as I appreciate that Palpatine was kind of kept at arm's length for a bit, I think you make a really excellent point of just, you have maybe one of the, just by, I guess, legacy at this point, maybe one of the greatest actors has ever lived because of the role he played. And a dude who clearly, Ian McDiarmid clearly deserves a chance to play the most iconic villain, if not Vader, to play that with dialogue that knows how to hit the sensibilities, the coldness, and the calculation of a character like Palpatine. So as much as I am I want there to be a separation for sure, you know what? I can't say I haven't thought about, like, what would the Emperor do with the dialogue available in Andor. I honestly, your story about Christopher Lee, and just kind of, again, I can't help but wonder now, what could they do because you know if they bring in Palpatine, it's not going to be dramatic music, doors open, it's Palpatine.
Absolutely.
I'm feeling very bad today. It's not that. Like, it could be, Mon Mothma goes to visit him and she has to talk to him about something, apparently. Like, it's part of her duty as a senator. And, it's like a long shot of him down a hallway. You don't really see maybe his face, but you see his entire robe. And, like, you get to hear him have a discussion about politics. I think that would be, again, I trust Gilroy and the team to do it sparingly or to do it in a way where it's not just shoving him into the plot. But I can't lie. Now that I think you have me convinced, like, I want to see what Ian McDiarmid and that character can do, not just with the dialogue, but how Tonija Gilroy thinks about, we're not just talking about Vader here. We're talking about the man above the dictator, the emperor of, like, the world. Like, how does that philosophy as a person, how does that change him, and how does that make him deal with senators now from his history, and how does that make him deal with the situation currently happening? The dialogue itself would be like, I can't stop thinking about what that might be like for Ian McDiarmid to have, but just the implications too. It's like, again, what Andor excels at is the philosophy behind the characters and the setting. It is a show about philosophy. It's philosophy as an idea is something that, again, a lot of shows sometimes lack. It's like, well, what's the philosophy here? What exactly are we asking about the world or the people or anything? I want to know what he would do if he had the opportunity to, even if he talks to Krennic. I mean, I know like a Krennic's coming back. Now I want to know, what would Palpatine actually do, and how would he approach it? Because if we get, listen, man, if we get a monologue from Palpatine about the cost of power or something, and it turns out to be happy. I'll be emailing you immediately and being like, we need to talk, because it's too good to be left on the table. I think that's where I'm at. It's like, you put an idea in my head that is way too good for us not to see it. So now I need to see it. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that we get it, because, oh man, would that be good.
But it's brilliant because, it's such a perfect spot for him. He doesn't have the ultimate power yet. If he did, he would dismantle the Senate. But he cannot dismantle the Senate until the Death Star is finished. So he's still sort of politically vulnerable. I mean, it's not the crazy, emperor from Return of the Jedi, like, who's completely lost in ultimate power or whatever. This would be maybe our last opportunity. So
I know, you're right.
Thanks for an amazing conversation.
There's never been a show where I've been this mind blown and this, it keeps coming back and you keep learning things, and it's self-referential. It's excellent. It has a staying power that will last for a while because it exists in a time where it was needed, and it needed to be said. Everything in this show needed to be shown to who's seen it. And if you've seen it, you know how it's impacted you. And it changed a lot of people, myself included.
Ovo je bio Šonom Rodžers ili Spaceman. Nadam se da ste uživali u razgovoru. Serija Andor nikad nije bila, čini mi se, aktuelnija. Upravo je izašla druga sezona, nominovana je za 14 Emmy nagrada za televizijske serije. Ono što je meni interesantno i što mi je upalo u oko je da skoro niko od glavnih glumaca nije nominovan. A da li to ima veze ili nema veze sa njihovim vrlo otvorenim političkim aktivizmom vezanim za rat i zločine u Gazi? Još jedna tema zanimljiva za diskusiju i za razmišljanje. Do sledeće nedelje možete da zapratite kanal ako već niste i možete da nas podržite preko Patreona. Vidimo se u sledećoj epizodi Feniksa.